Next Tuesday, we're going to do a little in-class exercise on television programming. I'll give you some basic ideas of television programming strategies, and then we'll pour over some ratings information and see if we can think like television programmers for a little while. I'm looking around for the most current ratings information that I can get. So I'll either manage to find that or we'll work on stuff that's slightly out of date. The principles are the same. JP?
Will this help us with our research paper?
It would actually, if you are working on one of the two topics that have to do with television or television programming. It will probably give you a better idea of what that's all about. Also, the lectures involving, talking about those concepts will certainly help, I guess. So that'll be good. At least I hope it'll be good. It's all up to you and what you can do with all of this stuff. So we were going to go on and keep on talking about television and cable TV and more recent developments in television. So I'm going to actually have a video on this, which is kind of interesting. So the early days of cable television were dedicated to retransmitting prime time, retransmitting broadcast signals. So the initial reason for the interest in cable television was just if you lived outside of a large city where you were close to a television transmitter, the quality of the signal declined the further you were away, or if you were, behind some kind of building or something. So cable could get you a better signal quality. And it was really a small business when it started out. It was television, stores, electronic stores, television stores that are trying to sell TVs. Realized, well, you can sell better if the TV picture looks its very best. So they would, for instance, run a direct cable from a large antenna, well situated. They'd run it to the store and then split it up and send it to all of the televisions that they were trying to sell. So that gave a better signal. And then when they sold those TVs, the customers will say, well, how come it doesn't look so good when I get it home? And they say, well, you don't have a great antenna, but we'll hook you up for $5 to our cable. And so then they would run cable, like literally, just on the telephone poles and stuff without asking the telephone company. They would set up these small little cable distribution chains in those neighborhoods and stuff. And it was a one-off. You'd just buy, okay, hook me up for $5 and then you were good. And then they realized, well, they could make people subscribe to this. And then really entrepreneurs would drive around with, lengths of cable in the back of their car, and they would just go to smaller communities and start wiring them up this way. And if they got enough subscribers in enough towns, then they could just sit back and hire somebody else to do that. And eventually these cable operators started to build, medium-sized businesses in different cities with subscribers who were hooked up to cable like that, and that's where it grew from. And those businesses consolidated into larger regional cable operators. Eventually, Comcast and others. So by that time, the entrepreneurs who set up the original cable industry would have been, bought out of it long ago. So like the people who started Comcast, I think, were involved in like manufacturing belts and stuff like that, like leather goods and things. And so they got into the cable TV business that way. And versus a Time Warner, which would have, of course, grown out of the magazine publishing empire, which there was a great deal of business consolidation at that point, over the last 30, 40 years, let's say from the 50s to the 80s. A lot of smaller businesses were bought up and constructed into larger vertically integrated companies like Disney is a great example today, where they own, obviously the theme parks, the movie studios, the, broadcast television channels, ESPN, so your cable networks, and they have a hand in, upcoming streaming deals that we talked about. So those kinds of really big vertically integrated companies come about in this period too. So the regulator got involved to the extent that the early idea was that cable had to be reined in to make sure that it didn't impinge upon the rights of the early broadcasters and their licenses that they had from the FCC. So as we talked about, there were rules put in place so that you had to carry, if you were a cable operator in San Francisco, you had to carry the affiliate stations in the San Francisco area. The idea was so that cable wouldn't cut out the over-the-air broadcasters who had got their licenses legally and such. So there were rules about that. There were rules as to how many cable outside of the geographic area cable, how many channels cable could bring in from outside of the geographic broadcast area, put it that way. So again, if you were a young Comcast, you had to carry the big major broadcast stations in the local area, but you also had a limit as to how many external stations you could bring in. And we saw something like the rise of what was called a superstation, which is how Ted Turner got his start in the TBS network. He had an Atlanta-based, what he called a superstation, which was just a big local station, but the signal was put out by satellite and made available to any cable distributor who wanted to do that. Corey?
Why you would have like Atlanta Braves game on like the middle of San Francisco summertime. I remember as a kid I would turn on, I'm like, why are the Braves on TV?
That's probably why. Yeah. But they would also carry a lot of, all the money that they got from the being licensed in those different cable systems. That meant your superstation had a lot of budget, so they could get bigger, larger profile sports. They could get, movies and stuff like that, which is where Turner realized the value of, licensing and then buying movie libraries so that they could put on old movies that people would want to see and stuff. So by that extra amount of money that you would get by being distributed even though you're a local Atlanta station, you're distributed across many different cable operators, you could get more interesting content than your other local independent stations, which, if they weren't network affiliates, they were really quite small operations until something like a superstation profile became possible, So the cable operators were initially limited as to how many of those they could bring in. And when the FCC saw that slowly they gained confidence, okay, cable is not going to destroy the terrestrial broadcasting system. In fact, people just seem to want to have more and more TV in whichever way. Then they raised a lot of those restrictions. Plus, digital television made it possible to have many, many more channels in your cable system. So that was a big deal. And then we have to note the rise of original programming created for cable, and HBO would have been, one of the first to do that. So I'll spare you the video about the beginnings of the cable industry, which is, another one of these kind of historical artifacts. But, hey Sam, let me go here. We're going to change this to me. Well, in fact, maybe it's just quicker not to log in, but just to search again something here. So this would be a history of HBO. So, what we're seeing there is this Fast Company. That's it. So let's just watch it.
box office is presenting the Pennsylvania Polka Festival in cooperation with Service Electric Company.
Round 11, 5 to go. Allie alternately dancing, fighting flat-footed and going to the rope.
HBO people, don't miss out. Let the music play. Down in Crackle Rock. Down in Crackle Rock.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Is this Larry David's house?
This is Larry David.
Oh, do you like Girl Scout cookies?
I find them abhorrent. But come in.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Sorry about the music there.
It was kind of intense.
Yeah.
It wasn't that much more expensive when it started than it is now.
It's interesting, right?
I have HBO, it's $18 a month, and when it started in the early 70s, it was $6. That really surprised me.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive back in that day too. Yeah. Did you guys notice any content or any content trends there that it's like, oh, that was an HBO show, or?
I didn't know Fraggle Rock was an HBO show.
No, neither did I. But it's interesting because they made a big move on getting the Muppets as well, actually. There's with Netflix has been producing a lot of kids content, and the worry is that parents will just like instantly just leave their kids in front of Netflix all the time. So HBO is now competing pretty heavily with Netflix, obviously for the premium dramas. You know, you can see there from the mid-90s and on, they really dominated. They had the highest budgets, they had, you know, the biggest viewerships, the prestige shows, and the only thing that brought that to an end is Netflix, basically. So they're really fighting on many fronts now. But yeah, they made a deal for the Muppets. Anyone watch the Vice News stuff? Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary.
It's really good.
Yeah, Yeah, so they've beat I'd say they've beat the big broadcast news businesses outright for sure with Vice, which is interesting because when I was in Montreal, that was just like a free handout, like newspaper, So boy, did those guys ever have a success. Yeah. Other thoughts about what you saw about just HBO? I mean, it's not the best way to consume it
I like how they touched on The Sopranos being the golden standard and how they really like set the tone for how even cable, AMC, all of their channels.
Is that a favorite show of yours, or you like?
I like The Sopranos a lot. Yeah, I haven't watched it all the way through, but just the style, the way that they made The Sopranos.
Yeah.
For all TV.
Gosh, you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing they point out there is the split last season, which we saw it. Is Game of Thrones doing it again? And, it's like if you've got a show that's popular enough. I know Mad Men did it as well. So you split the last season, so you only have to produce like 8, and then a year later you do 8 more, so you can spin it out. That's obviously a paying strategy that they found. Micah, did you have your hand up? Or nope? Oh yeah, Tony.
It's interesting now how they've gone from HBO on television, how it's gone digital. Yeah. Now there's the HBO Now app. I was at AT&T store yesterday to get a new phone, and it says, "Oh, do you have DirecTV at home?" Because AT&T just recently acquired DirecTV. DirecTV Now has a Direct Now app, so you no longer have to have a dish. You no longer have to have the dish, because they have the dish. You don't need any of that stuff. All you need is a smartphone.
Gotcha.
To watch TV, and of course it can transfer over to your television. I'm cool with that.
Right.
All
right.
I need is a TV now.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a perfect example of what we were talking about with convergence, right? Because it's like there, you've got a program distributor who's also a cell phone operator who buys, a content creator and can now, offer you, when you go buy your phone, you can basically get what appears to be like a $16 a month value.
$10. That's what Direct Now.
Right. Cheaper.
Costs.
Right.
$10.
So Direct Now, you have to be a subscriber to the Dish Network or whatever the satellite. No.
It's the app.
I know
right?
there's 2 different apps. There's one where you have to be a subscriber and you can simply get the program. The other one you can buy it outright without being a subscriber, which is
you don't need the subscriber is the one who has.
There's HBO Now and there's HBO Go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Now is. You don't have to be a subscriber.
Okay,
all you need is the phone app.
Right.
You pay $10 a month along with your cell phone bill.
Right.
Boom.
And then Go is when you are a subscriber to either a cable or a Dish Network, and you can take it on the go with you.
That happened first.
All right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Gino, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sort of adding on to what she's saying, like, because of HBO doing this thing, it's kind of interesting to see how cable TV companies are trying to really fight against it, because my parents and I, we have like the most basic cable subscription ever. Because the thing is, Comcast requires, so they do this thing where if you get the package, right, it's a lot cheaper to keep your cable and your internet than it is to like deviate from the cable. Yeah, it's a lot cheaper to do that than like if you just wanted to say screw it and like, cut the cord and just like keep the internet, then they'll charge you more for the internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they're literally willing to give us like the cheapest cable subscription along with HBO, just to like keep us on their service. So
something like HBO is a goodie that they can dole out just to keep you on board with the rest of it. Yeah. So I think I mentioned it maybe in the first or second lecture. And again, a lot of this is, I'm just getting back into all of it, but for a long time, HBO and that premium programming was viewed as holding together the cable bundle. Mm-hmm. HBO and then ESPN is not a premium programming set, but it was in a second tier of cable. Like you had to pay a little more for it, and then they moved it down to a basic level. So basically things like ESPN, things like HBO were assumed to be keeping people in the cable subscriber mode, and now that cord cutting kind of reached a threshold, And now you see HBO says, okay, you know, you can get it completely outside of cable with HBO Now. And ESPN is going to be doing the same thing. So it kind of like broke that, you know, that little connection that the cable industry was counting on, which is like, well, they got to stay with cable if they want HBO and those premium services, or if they want to get their ESPN. And it just blew up like within the last couple of years. So yeah, HBO. And the thing is, $16 if you buy it outright, but we'll give it to you for free. So then people start asking, well, what is really the value of HBO? You know, it's really expensive if you kind of buy it. Is it $16? Is it worth $10? Or if I just like, you know, hassle the cable company, maybe I'll get it for free. So I think that, you know, when you pay money and you buy stuff, people want to know that they're not getting ripped off, you know. And cable is like I think people view the cable industry badly because prices do fluctuate so much. It's like buying a mattress or something. Like you can get it for like half as much. So what's it truly worth is the question. Olive?
Well, also the bundle too, majority of people don't watch every single channel they get.
Yeah.
So they get a la carte, as they say in the book.
Yes.
But even then, that tends to become expensive.
Yes.
Channel, or network, whatever. And that is probably more frequent than the bundle now because most people, like I said, don't watch every single channel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who aren't interested in sports, but they want to watch comedies or TV dramas.
Sure.
Vice versa.
Yeah, and ESPN was adding $5 to every basic cable bill everywhere. That's how much they, you know. So people were saying, well, if I don't like ESPN, how come I still have to pay that? Yeah. So the bundling was so bundling simply means that, you know, if you want to get the channel you want, you also have to take everything they give you on that tier of service. So there's like 30 channels on the next tier up. You've got to take them all, even if you don't want them. And so again, because we just talked about this, the pricing, the value of an individual channel seems to fluctuate so much. People are saying, well, you know, like, can't I just remove this one and it's like $5 cheaper? Why are you doing that? So the a la carte thing is obviously what people were looking forward to, that they wanted to get. It's just, it's not that easy for a cable company to actually arrange that, to start, you know, just distributing people what they want, not with old cable technology. So that's an issue for them. But as cable kind of, you know, as the internet, as digital streaming starts to look more and more like cable, then a la carte becomes much more realistic, you know. And as you've seen, you know, Comcast is as much in the internet provision business as they are in the cable television business. And so they've all kind of moved their holdings to expand into like the next generation. Let's say it all goes to internet protocol streaming, then they're already ready. A lot of them are making their money from selling you that access now. You know. So if you know, a bundle was, it was a big concept. The other thing is, people didn't realize it, but I was interested to learn when I first started learning about this, the cable companies themselves are subject to that same bundling pressure, in the sense that if, you know, if Viacom has, you know, BETV, MTV, and, you know, they've got they've got at least 10 cable networks. Maybe there's one that you want, but you'll have to take the whole bundle from Viacom. So since you had to do that, you're going to pass that crap on to your, you know, subscribers as well. It's like, I had to take it, so now you get it, you know. And so these cable companies are actually being squeezed through bundling as well. So interesting. But I think ideally for the consumer, we'd like to see a point where you can really truly go a la carte and get what you want. And I guess we're seeing that, right, with all the broadcasters, getting into, how did I get to that? I mean, I need to, that's what, sorry folks.
I mean, like, even with DirecTV now, I'm so thankful that these engineers have figured out a way where, you know, you can just, smartphone's the way to go, you know? Mobile,
Right, true, Tony, but
Mobile delivery.
that's true, but it really is, we're forgetting how little time comparatively it's been for everybody to get a smartphone, and not everybody has a smartphone
And
still.
not everybody wants a smartphone, and my
Yeah.
mother has a smartphone. She wouldn't dare get into all of this
Right.
switching up and getting into the downside.
So it's these new developments are still catching on as people get more and more comfortable.
Still like the simple, basic simplicity of old television and
Yeah. So they want to be able to serve them all.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can. So, and maybe if we're really got 15 minutes left, but it's something we might want to discuss eventually is, given that all the major networks have their own streaming services now, we see Disney is about to launch a couple. So each of these are sold a la carte. And, eventually the cost is going to add up. Your $10 for HBO Now and your, $6 for CBS, whatever it's called, I can't remember, but each of them has the same type of thing, a network name and some silly thing afterwards designates their streaming platform. So by the time you're paying $60 for individual a la carte streaming services that you want, are we going to go back to a point where Amazon will say, we've taken the top 10 of those and we'll give them to you along with Amazon Prime and an additional $24.95 a month, and then you're going to get back into bundling, right? But you'll be happy to get back in there because it'll seem to cost less for a while. So it seems to me we're bouncing back and forth between true a la carte and bundles, and I think we'll see that. Jenny?
I'm a little bit confused. Is a la carte synonymous with bundle, or is a la carte?
It would be the opposite, yeah.
So a la carte is you selecting that one channel as opposed to taking all the crap.
Exactly. Instead, the bundle is like you get 20 channels for an additional $12.95 a month. A la carte is, okay, we'll sell you this individual channel, and you can build your menu as you want.
Pick
Like on a
30 different channels and it'll be this much.
Yeah.
Or pick maybe one or two, and that would be.
It doesn't come to 30, but that's the principle anyway. Cool. So let's try to stick with some history here. But HBO, MTV, these are the really big original draws to cable television. For those who could already get decent terrestrial broadcast, why get cable? Because now there are all these other interesting programs that are only on cable. And to state the obvious, but it's worth stating, in terms of financing models, broadcast TV works on selling advertising, and the product is free to the consumer, but the advertiser pays to be a part of television programming when we're talking broadcast over the air. You've got your cable, which depends on an additional revenue service, subscriptions, right? So you subscribe to Comcast. In addition, Comcast can also sell advertising just like network broadcasts do. So they have two network streams. They can get subscription, and they can also put advertisements in. And then, as we've seen more and more in the last 10 years or so, as people can skip all the advertisements that are chunked into the programming, your 60 seconds or your 30 seconds, there's also product placement. So product placement is also interesting because it can be, the funds from product placement can go to a broadcaster or distributor, but it can also go to a program creator too. So a studio, like an NBC Studios, which is owned by Comcast, an NBC Studios can, make a deal with Coke or with Apple to place all their products in a show, make money off of that on the production end. So they basically can make, fund the show based on some of those placements. And then later on, so that's NBC Universal makes the show. It gets distributed, and Comcast can then make money off of that later on as well by putting in traditional advertising and stuff. So cable is actually a strong competitor to broadcast because they can do everything broadcast can do to make money, and they can also get subscription fees as well. So that's why sometimes you'll see them just go, well, okay, we're going to kind of make this available. Perhaps we'll take less for subscription fees because we want to have more people seeing our product so that we can make more on the product placement. If we get more people to subscribe to HBO, X million people more, we can make more on the production end with placing products and doing things like that. So it's a complex business, but as you see, there's many ways to make money, and for a cable operator, there's a lot of different ways to make money, a lot of different ways. So that's interesting. By contrast, if we look at the small part of TV, which is not dedicated to making money, but rather serving the public interest, right? We see in the 60s where, I think given the political, idealism of the time, maybe it's not idealism, maybe it's a kind of realism. Anyway, the civil rights movement, the whole rejection of commercialism, I think, inspired the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was set up by Congress to channel funds to the public broadcasting system. And we don't have a public television system like they would in Canada or Australia or England, where you've got a strong public broadcaster. What we have is each of these affiliate stations, like your KQED in our area. They're private, nonprofit entities. They have to raise money by donations, and they also get part of their budget from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So they get federal money, especially those stations which are actually production entities as well. Like KQED makes a lot of serious hour-long documentaries about California issues. Boston, Chicago. There's a few of the public broadcast stations are actually so big that they produce programming for the rest of call it a network, but it's really a loose affiliation. I would say, why is it not a network? They're not obliged to take any of the shows that the different public broadcast distribution networks, there's a few of them, make available. So unlike a broadcast network like CBS, ABC that obliges each of their affiliate stations to carry exactly the same thing, the public broadcast stations can pick and choose whatever works better in their particular areas. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Even on the quiz, it's like affiliates versus networks.
Yeah.
Where's the difference? I mean a real clear difference in the two.
Well, an affiliate is a privately owned station, right? So whatever, Kron is owned by the Young Group, which is a station ownership group that may have a dozen stations throughout the USA, but they would be an affiliate of a network.
Of what network?
They were once an affiliate of NBC.
Okay.
And now they're an affiliate of something called My Network, which is it's an additional product of Fox. So it is it only provides a couple of hours of quote unquote My Network programming per day. And Kron is basically on its own for the rest of that time. But even KPIX, your CBS, now they're owned and operated, so again, we'll have more information about this, but an affiliate is then a privately owned station that makes a contract with a network to show all of its programming.
So for example, Oprah Winfrey started the OWN, OWN network.
Yeah. Well, so Oprah is a syndicated show. That means there are some shows which are produced by private companies that don't have a deal with any single network. They produce the show, and then their salespeople go through all of the local markets. Well, they have big kind of conventions and stuff where these deals are signed. And so then they'll say, okay, well, Oprah is going to go on CBS in San Francisco, but maybe we'll sell her to ABC in Chicago or wherever else. So that's how she became, the biggest thing ever. And she got so big, she decided, okay, I'm done with the syndicated business. I'm going to launch my own cable channel, which is what she did.
Because she started on BET, right?
Yeah, did she? I can't remember.
I think it's BET.
Oprah?
I'm not sure. I think she
I
was.
I know she began on.
Anyway, it doesn't matter, folks. We got 5 minutes to talk about more general stuff.
Okay.
But that was her approach, was to move from being a syndicated show out to being a cable network, and it was rough going in the beginning, even for Oprah. So that's an interesting story and transition. So what's happening with this? The networks, clearly were in a dominant position from the 50s through to the 80s. You only could watch one of 3 networks typically, and there were independent stations, but they've never been really competitive towards networks and what they could offer. But starting in the 80s, when part of the audience fragmented off and started watching original cable shows, the terrestrial networks lost share. By share, I mean eyeballs. They lost part of their audience. Fox was launched as the 4th network in the early 1980s, so that was still something that you could do. In fact, some of Fox's original affiliates were old Dumont stations, and some of them they were poaching away from CBS and the other networks. So you had to have enough local stations that you could launch a new network. So that was a real challenge. And then as you go along, basically probably in 1960s, 70s, 30 million people watching a network show in prime time was not an uncommon thing. You maybe had 100 million households watching television at that time, and they had a choice of one of 3 networks largely. Now you're lucky if you have 3 million individual viewers watching, what's considered a hit on CBS, like a Big Bang Theory or something like that. So they've really lost an enormous percentage of their audience, and yet the big networks have remained profitable by raising advertising rates all the way through. So CBS is still more profitable than it's ever been, even though its numbers are 10 times smaller than they ever were before. So sooner or later, we're going to reach a point, though, where they can't keep that up, where advertising dollars are going to get siphoned off to digital, and those networks are busy doing all kinds of things. I mean, CBS is starting a streaming service to compensate. They're putting tons more CBS branded shows in their libraries, and they're going to be distributing those over the internet on demand. So they've been preparing for a long time for this transition. They're not going to go away. They're going to morph into online streaming services, using free broadcast TV as a way of creating, as a loss leader, basically. People will know those shows because they were exposed to them for free, but the value of those shows will more and more be as streaming. The network no longer has so much power over its affiliates as well. The only thing is, you're in such bad shape if you're not an affiliate of a major network that it's still not very attractive. We can tell the story of Cron next class. We'll have to squeeze in satellite there as well too. So no matter how hard we try to keep on track, it's a challenge. We did touch on internet delivery of TV programs. Cool. Okay, so next class we'll incorporate some of what we're missing into our talk about programming strategies, like how the different outlets compete with each other for eyeballs on a given night. So we can look at that. Great. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You as well.